Here's an expanded part 1 in a natural story-like style, around 320 words, without a heading. The city had just begun another busy Monday morning when a man in simple clothes stepped out of a taxi in front of one of the country's most successful corporate headquarters. No one gave him a second glance. His plain shirt, worn leather shoes, and small notebook made him look like an ordinary visitor. What nobody knew was that he was the billionaire who had built the company from a tiny rented office into a business worth billions of dollars. For years, he had believed that a company's true culture could not be measured by profits alone. It was revealed in the way employees treated people when they thought no one important was watching. Curious to see whether the values he had always promoted were still alive, he decided to visit the office without informing anyone. He walked through the glass entrance with a gentle smile and approached the reception desk. The receptionist briefly looked up before returning her attention to the computer screen. "Please have a seat. Someone will come for you," she said in a flat voice. The man thanked her politely and sat down in the waiting area. Around him, employees hurried through the lobby carrying laptops, coffee cups, and stacks of documents. Some glanced at him for a moment before looking away. Others walked past without even acknowledging his presence. He remained calm, observing every small detail. He noticed that security guards greeted senior managers warmly but barely spoke to visitors. He watched how some executives smiled only when they recognized familiar faces, ignoring everyone else. The billionaire wrote a few quiet notes in his notebook. He wasn't angry. He wasn't looking for mistakes to punish. He simply wanted to understand whether the company still reflected the values on which it had been built: respect, humility, and kindness toward every person. Without revealing who he was, he continued waiting patiently, knowing that the next few minutes would tell him far more about his company than any financial report ever could. Here's an expanded part 2 in a natural style, around 320 words, without a heading. The man remained seated in the reception area, quietly watching the steady flow of people entering and leaving the building. Every few moments, the elevator doors opened and another group of employees hurried toward their offices. Most were busy checking emails on their phones or discussing meetings scheduled for the day. Very few noticed the visitor sitting alone in the corner. 6 minutes passed. To most people, 6 minutes was nothing. But to someone carefully observing the culture of his own company, it revealed more than months of polished presentations and glowing performance reports. Several senior executives entered the lobby, laughing together as they talked about an upcoming client meeting. They walked only a few feet from the waiting area. One of them briefly looked toward the visitor but quickly looked away, assuming he was just another stranger waiting for an appointment. No one greeted him or asked whether he needed assistance. A few moments later, one executive quietly told the receptionist, "Make sure visitors don't wander around the office. We have important people arriving today." The billionaire heard the remark clearly. He simply smiled and continued waiting. His expression never changed. Then the elevator doors opened again. His personal assistant stepped out, carrying a folder of documents. The assistant immediately froze after noticing the man in the waiting area. "Sir, you're here?" the assistant asked in surprise before quickly walking over. "I'm so sorry. We didn't know you were coming." The receptionist looked confused until the assistant addressed the visitor by name. Within seconds, the color drained from her face. The executives who had ignored him stopped talking and turned around. They suddenly realized that the quiet man they had overlooked was the founder and owner of the entire company. An uncomfortable silence filled the lobby. No one knew what to say. The billionaire slowly stood up, closed his notebook, and looked around the room. He wasn't angry or raising his voice. His calm expression made everyone realize that the real conversation was only about to begin. Here's an expanded part 3 in a natural, authentic style, around 320 words, without a heading. Within minutes, every senior executive had gathered in the main conference room. The atmosphere was completely different from the cheerful conversations in the lobby just moments earlier. No one spoke unless necessary. Everyone knew the unexpected visit had exposed something far more serious than a missed greeting. The billionaire entered the room carrying the same small notebook. He placed it on the table and looked around at the faces before him. His voice was calm. "I didn't come here to test your memory or your ability to recognize me," he said. "I came to see how this company treats someone who appears to have no influence." The room remained silent. He opened the notebook and read a few observations. He mentioned how visitors had been ignored, how employees greeted only senior managers, and how assumptions had been made based solely on appearance. None of the points were exaggerated. They were simple facts that everyone in the room had either witnessed or taken part in. "When I started this business," he continued, "I met my first customers in borrowed offices. Many people respected me before they knew whether I could offer them anything in return. I promised myself that if I ever built a successful company, every person who walked through our doors would be treated with dignity." He paused for a moment before asking, "If this is how we welcome an unknown visitor, what experience do our customers receive every day?" No one had an answer. The billionaire explained that leadership was not measured by titles, expensive suits, or corner offices. It was reflected in everyday actions, especially when no one believed they were being watched. After carefully reviewing the situation, he announced that several executives would no longer remain in leadership positions because they had failed to uphold the company's values. At the same time, employees known for their kindness, professionalism, and respect toward everyone would be promoted. The decision surprised many, but the message was unmistakable. A successful business could recover from financial mistakes, but it could never afford to lose its character. Here's an expanded part 4 in a natural, authentic style, around 320 words, without a heading. The changes began the very next day. New managers stepped into leadership roles, not because they had the loudest voices or the most impressive resumes, but because they had consistently shown respect, honesty, and kindness in their daily work. The billionaire believed that these qualities created stronger teams than fear or authority ever could. Every department attended workshops focused on customer service, communication, and professional conduct. Employees were reminded that every visitor deserved a warm welcome, whether they were a delivery driver, a job applicant, a customer, or a business partner. A simple greeting, a smile, or an offer to help could shape someone's entire impression of the company. At first, some employees thought the new standards were unnecessary, but as the weeks passed, they noticed a remarkable difference. Customers began sending messages praising the friendly atmosphere. Business partners commented on how welcoming the office had become. Even employees felt more valued because respect was no longer reserved for people with important titles. One afternoon, the billionaire returned to the headquarters without announcing his visit. This time, the receptionist greeted him with the same genuine smile she offered every visitor. A security guard politely opened the door for an elderly courier carrying heavy packages. A young intern paused to help a confused guest find the correct meeting room without being asked. The billionaire quietly observed these small moments before leaving the building. He didn't need to reveal himself or make another speech. The culture had begun to change because people finally understood that respect was not a rule to follow only when the boss was present. It had become part of who they were. Months later, the company continued to grow, earning not only higher profits, but also a reputation for integrity and professionalism. Employees often remembered the unexpected visit that transformed their workplace forever. The billionaire's lesson stayed with them. Success may open doors, but it is humility, kindness, and respect that keep those doors open for generations to come.